Thank you for being here this morning. If you want to go ahead and be turning in your Bible to 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19, that's where we'll be this morning. Of course, if you know that on our website, c3cmc.org, I like to remind you guys of this on the website. If you go to sermons, the notes for today's message and last week's are on the website. You can follow along as we go through this morning. If you have an iPad, iPhone, a tablet, something like that, you can follow the notes along as we go through the message today. And I especially wanted to remind you of that today because this is probably one of those messages in a little two-part series that we started last week called Down Under. But this is one of those messages that you may not need it today, but you'll need it at some point in your life. And I want you to remember, if you don't remember anything else, I can go back and look at those notes. Because there's some things in God's Word that speak to us on a very difficult and very demanding subject. It's two parts. Obviously, last week we talked about stress and how stress can get you feeling down under, much like you go under the water and your eyes are closed and you don't know how far it is up to the top and you don't know how long it's going to take you to get to the top, and you're wondering, am I going to have to try to breathe before I can get up to the top and get air? And that stress can get on you and cause you to have so much pressure in your life that it can get overwhelming. Well, this is the second part of that, and something that stress often leads to, and that's the problem of depression. Depression. Today's message is called Despair Repair. I know you think, well, Brother Tim, you played this cute little word game with a two-part series. It's called Down Under, 2 words, and both sermons have 2-word titles. Stress, mess, and despair repair. That's kind of cute, isn't it? But this subject we're talking about, if you've ever had despair setting in your life to the point of depression, it's not cute at all, is it? It's something that we all deal with, and I'm so thankful that we have God's Word today, because sometimes you get and you think, what can God possibly know about what I got going on today? This Bible was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it talks about events that happened 6,000 years ago, and how can this possibly apply to what I've got going on today in my life? Well, there's 2 things about the Bible that I really love. I really love about the Bible. One, I'm convinced that it is the very Word of God. I'm convinced of that. And 2, what I really also love about the Bible is the people in the Bible are so real. You know, the Bible doesn't sugarcoat things. And the people in the Bible, if they were all perfect and holy and didn't make mistakes and didn't have problems, I'd have trouble relating to them. Because I don't know about you guys may not, but I got problems in my life. I go through things in my life. I have pressure. We go through some things. We get to feeling down under sometimes, don't we? And sometimes, and I don't know why this is, but we have such a problem, such a stigma of telling somebody, hey, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling depressed. And especially as Christians, we somehow think that when you made that profession of faith and you asked Christ into your heart, that all of a sudden you're immune to having problems, and you're immune to stress, and you're immune to depression and all these things, but you're not. Some of the most godly people in the Bible experienced depression to the point that they wanted God to take their life, and we'll talk about them later, but you know, you're generally under one of 2 things. You're either under pressure or you're under problems. You're either under pressure or you're under problems. When you get under pressure and there's things in your life that cause you to be under pressure, be it job, be it family, relationships, money, whatever, you experience stress. And if that stress persists and that stress, you don't deal with it or you don't get through it, at some point you experience problems. You've got problems. And when you get under those problems, the weight of those things can be so overwhelming that you think, I don't see any way out of this. I don't see any way I can deal with this. we've got some good news. There's a man in the Bible that I think was under intense stress and under intense problems. In fact, he had, even in his own country, the queen of that country put out a hit on him. He had a contract on his life. That man's name was Elijah. We've all heard of Elijah. I'm actually pretty envious of Elijah because I believe, this is a side note, we're chasing a rabbit here, but I believe one of the two witnesses in Revelation that can breathe fire, I believe one of those two witnesses will be Elijah. I believe Enoch's the other one. I think Scripture bears that out. I'm right. So I'm a little bit jealous of Elijah because if you know me, you've been here very long, you know I really would like to breathe fire. I've always wanted to breathe fire. I just think that'd be awesome. If I could breathe fire, I'm telling you what, that'd be great. It probably wouldn't be great for everybody. All of y'all would be safe. I mean, I'm pretty sure. Most days. But you know what? Elijah had enjoyed a terrific, great victory. He had actually told the king of Israel, he said, hey, I'm fixing to pray for God to stop the rain, and it's not going to rain. So he did. Elijah prayed for the rain to stop, and it stopped. And guess when that rain started again? When Elijah prayed for it to rain. Can you imagine? Can you imagine they come in and say, hey guys, it's not going to rain for about 3 years here because I'm going to pray for God to stop the rain. I pray God stops the rain. About 3 years later, I say, okay, I'm going to pray for God to start the rain again, and He does it. How cool would that be? That's probably even cooler than breathing fire. And then Elijah has a terrific experience with a widow where he literally raises her son from the dead. And then the great prophet Elijah challenges 450 prophets of Baal, and he challenges them, and they go up on the mountain, and he says, okay, we're going to find out today who God is. If Baal is God, fine. Let the people follow you and follow Baal. But if God's God, let people put this mess away and follow God. He said, we're going to find out who's the real thing today. And they go up on the mountain before all the people, 450 prophets of Baal, and there's Elijah. And they get two calves. They get two oxen. They each make an altar, and they cut them up, and they put them on the altar. And Elijah says, okay, now you guys pray to Baal that he will burn up that offering. And they pray, and they carry on, and all 450 of them. I'm thinking 450 of them, not one of them thought to bring a match. But either way. They pray and they cry out, and they even get to cutting themselves, and they said there's blood gushing out of these 450 prophets because they're asking Baal to do something. And guess what? Baal is not going to do anything. And he didn't. So Elijah says, okay, get over here. We see what Baal's going to do for you. So let's go over here, and I prepared this offering. And I tell you what I'd like for you to do. I'd like for you to take this offering over here, and I just want you to show you who God is. I want you to take a pitcher of water, and I want you to soak it down. So they did. He said, I tell you what, just so you will know for sure, I want you to get another pitcher of water and soak it again. So they did. He said, I tell you what, do it a third time, just so there's no doubt in anybody's mind. This stuff is soaking wet. This wood soaked, the offering soaked down, and he dug a trench around the whole thing, and they poured so much water on it that the trench around it was even filled with water. And then Elijah said, okay, Lord, show up. And he burned up the offering. It caught on fire. And then God allowed Elijah to kill all 450 false prophets. Great victory in front of all the people. But Elijah experienced something right after that, and sometimes we see this where you have a great victory, you have a great high, and then you get to some unspeakable low. And this happened to Elijah. But guys in the room, you'll understand this. It was mostly because of a woman. Elijah's problem was a wicked woman. I won't give a testimony on that this morning, but Elijah's problem was a wicked woman. This woman Jezebel had put out a contract on his life. See, she worshipped this false idol Baal. And those 450 prophets were hers. She got mad and she says, by this time tomorrow, Elijah's going to be like one of them. I want him took out. So he's having a bad day, okay? So we can kind of understand Elijah getting to the point where he's a little bit depressed. I get that, I understand that. And you know, we all have a bad day. You know you're having a bad day when you wake up and you discover your waterbed has sprung a leak, only to remember you don't have a waterbed. You know you're having a bad day when it's your birthday and the weight of the candles makes the cake collapse. You're having a bad day. You're having a bad day when your 4-year-old walks in the room and announces to you that you cannot flush a grapefruit. You're having a bad day, right? You're having a bad day when you call home, you're on your way home from work, you call home, you tell your wife you want to eat out, and you get there and there's a sandwich on the front porch. You're having a bad day. You're having a bad day when you call suicide prevention, they put you on hold. You're having a bad day. We all have bad days, don't we? Y'all are laughing because some of y'all have got or have had 4-year-olds and they're going to try to flush something down the toilet. They're going to flush down the toilet. But that's not what we're talking about here, is it? We're not talking about just a bad day. Everybody has those. Elijah's really having a bad time. We're talking about when that bad day turns into weeks. Those weeks turn into months. That drags on, and you don't know if you see light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, you don't know if there is an end of the tunnel. That's the kind of depression we're talking about today. We're talking about something that goes on and goes on and goes on. You know, 1 out of 10 people at any given time are dealing with depression. 19 million Americans over the age of 18 are dealing with depression as we speak. So this isn't something that happens very rarely. This is something that's pretty common. Did you know that you are 10 times more likely to be depressed than your father? And you are 20 times more likely to be depressed than your grandfather. That by 2020, experts say depression will be the second leading killer of Americans behind heart disease. By 2020, if the trends continue. But let me tell you something, depression is not a sin. Depression is not a sin. There's been some, like I mentioned before, some godly people suffer from depression. Moses got depressed. Job got depressed. Elijah got depressed. A man after God's own heart, King David, who seemingly had everything. He had power, he had fame, he certainly had God's favor. He said this in Psalm 42:5. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise Him for the help of His countenance. King David said that. He got depressed. See, the first thing we need to admit that we need to do if we're experiencing some of these things that cause and even lead to depression, we need to admit the problem. That's one of the best things somebody that's experiencing depression or going through a rough time can do is admit there's a problem. See, if you don't admit that you have a problem, you're never going to fix it. Being in the medical field before, as you know, I used to be a paramedic. There were many times if you've ever been in that field, I know Kelly's a nurse and several others been in healthcare. You know that if you work in the same hospital, you work in the same area, you get a lot of people we call regulars. You see people that have the same problem over and over and over. The same alcoholic every weekend. You know he's going to tie one on. You're going to have to go take him to the hospital. You see the same people going in the ER that's overdosed on drugs again. And you know what you find out pretty quickly? Just about every one of them will tell you they don't have a problem. So So the first step in getting help and getting through a depression is to admit you've got a problem. Now, there's 4 stages of depression that I want to talk about this morning. I don't know if you can see them real well, but I'll tell them to you anyway. First is dejection. Dejection. Now that's temporary. That's a little temporary valley. That's, I woke up and figured out my water bed's got a leak, and then remembered I don't have a water bed. That's this. That's this. This dejection, it passes pretty quickly. It's a little valley you go through and then you're out of it. Okay? That's dejection. But that can lead to discouragement. And that's a sense of despair and hopelessness. But that's also temporary. That's also temporary. You also work your way through that. Things just get better. And then there's despondency. Now that's an intense feeling of hopelessness and discouragement that lasts for an extended period of time and generally causes sleeplessness and loss of appetite. Now, this isn't something that's here today and gone tomorrow. That's where we got to despondency. And then we get to the last stage. We get to the 4th stage of depression. And that's despair. That's despair. That's when those feelings won't go away. You don't see any light at the end of the tunnel whatsoever. You don't see any way to get through this. You think it's just things can only get worse. You start to have severe thoughts of hopelessness and desperation, and usually suicidal thoughts creep in at this time. And you know what's the biggest danger of this? And what we generally want to do when we find ourselves in one of these later stages, we want to run off and get off by ourselves. We want to run off and get off by ourselves. And that's just about the worst thing you can do. But if you're experiencing any of these stages, I beg you, please admit you've got a problem. First, admit it to yourself. Second, admit it to God. And guess what? He already knows. There's no sense in trying to keep it from Him. Then find somebody you trust, somebody you love. Talk to them. Don't bottle it up. It's not just going to go away. But first we have to admit there's a problem. Second, we've got to analyze the problem. One of the best things somebody suffering from depression can do is take the time to figure out why they're depressed in the first place. That's one of the best things somebody suffering from depression can do. And sometimes it's easy to figure out. Sometimes you know what the problem is. You know what's going on. You've had a life-changing event. You have something you can point to. But other times it's not so easy. And that's when it can be really frustrating, when you admit there's a problem and then you start analyzing the problem and you can't figure out why you're depressed in the first place. That can be so frustrating, and that can even lead to things getting worse. But we've got to understand that if we continue to work toward that and analyze the problem, eventually we'll get to the bottom of it. And if figuring out the problem is one of the best things you can do, let me tell you one of the worst things you can do, and that's what Elijah did in 1 Kings 19, 3 through 5. Verse 3, it says, "And when he saw that, he arose and ran for his life, and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die, and said, 'It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers.' Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, 'Arise and eat.'" Like I said, one of the temptations once you get into these later stages of depression is to withdraw. And that's what Elijah did. He ran off with his servant, went to Beersheba, he ran away, and then he left his servant there, and he went another day out into the wilderness. That's why when I'm going through tough things, I usually call Philip and say, "Philip, it's time for us to go hiking." Because I don't want to go by myself. And I know your life is probably so good and you're so mentally strong that you never experienced something like this, but I'm going to share with you this morning. I've gotten to a place in my life where I said, you know what? I'm worthless. And I went off by myself. And the details don't even matter, but let me just tell you this. I didn't intend to come back. Trust me, it can happen to you. I went in a closet. I had a .40 caliber pistol, and I didn't intend on coming out. There it is. Thankfully, Amy recognized something was going on. She came up the stairs and said, honey, what are you doing in the closet? I said, go away. She said, no. We got through it. We got through it. But Elijah did the thing that you're tempted to do. Let's go off by yourself. Now I make Philip go with me and we just eat too much. We hide. Now I go off to do the one thing I should do. I don't go off to go by myself. I go off to get with me and God. And He's there just like He was there then. If I'd opened my eyes and realized it. Could have saved myself a lot of heartache and a lot of trouble. And a testimony I really don't want to have. Facts are the facts. See, once we admit the problem, we start to analyze the problem, we realize we've got a problem, and sometimes we don't know how we're going to fix the problem, so we want to run off by ourselves. But look, here's the thing. Those people that commit suicide do so when they're alone. Those people don't commit suicide in front of a bunch of people, in front of anybody else. They get off alone and do it. Don't let yourself get there. And when we realize, when we start trying to analyze the problem, that there's really basically three causes of depression. There's physical, emotional, and spiritual. There's physical, emotional, and spiritual. Now the physical is pretty easy. That can be an illness. That can be all sorts of physical things. That can be a chemical imbalance. At times we've even joked about that, but there's neurotransmitters in your brain. And if those neurotransmitters get out of whack, serotonin or dopamine, or if they get out of whack, they get too low, you can get into a depression and not even realize why, and there not even be a cause why, but it's a physical thing. It's a chemical problem. And it can be fixed. So there's physical causes of depression. There's also emotional causes. I call these the 3 Ds. Divorce, disaster, and death. Emotional causes of depression. You can experience any one of those things, and it can push you into depression. You can have a disaster. You can have a death of a loved one. You can go through a divorce. And we have to admit, at least, that there's spiritual causes of depression. Did you know that psychiatrists and psychologists say the number one cause of depression is repressed anger or bitterness? Repressed anger or bitterness. Folks, that's a spiritual problem. In fact, I see that. If they say that's the leading cause of depression, I'd say, well, spiritual causes are the leading causes. That's a spiritual problem. Repressed anger and bitterness. You just can't get over something somebody's done to you. You can't get past something. I know that at times people have even got mad at God about things that have happened to them, and they hold that bitterness and anger toward Him. You got a spiritual problem. But once you've admitted there's a problem, and you've analyzed the problem, then you can attack the problem. That's what I like to get to. That's when we do something about it. That's what, because see, thus far we haven't dealt with the problem yet. There's nothing wrong with getting depressed or being depressed. Here's the problem. There's something wrong with staying depressed. It's not a sin to get depressed. It's not even a sin to be depressed. But I think it's a sin to stay depressed. Because that's where you don't try to do anything about it. And Jesus said He came that we might have joy. And the Bible calls that an unspeakable and full of glory in description of that joy. That's the kind of joy we're supposed to have. Now, we know we don't have that all the time. We have problems. We have pressure. We get under one of those two things. We get stressed, and then we can get depressed. So that's not the problem. The problem is not doing something about it. So, some things you can do to help if you find yourself in one of these especially late stages of depression. One is you can refresh yourself. Look at 1 Kings 19, 5 and 6. It says, Then as he lay and slept under a broom tree, suddenly an angel touched him and said, Arise and eat. Then he looked, and there by his head was a cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Elijah got him something to eat. He had a good meal. He lay down and rested, got him some sleep, and I guarantee you things started to get better. It seems so simple, but especially when you got a physical problem that's causing your depression. You know, Elijah was just plain old worn out. That's why I believe that pastors should get at least 3 weeks a year vacation. Because if he's good, he deserves it. And if he's not good, the congregation deserves it. So I think pastors should all get at least 3 weeks off, because he's one of the two. But then Elijah did something that was even more helpful than refreshing himself, and that was he focused on God. Look at verses 9 through 14. It says, And there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? So he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord, God of hosts, for the children of Israel, and have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Then he said, Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mouth and went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Elijah just repeats himself, doesn't he? You ever been in a place where the Lord says, What are you doing? What are you doing there? Because the Lord may allow us to get in situations that cause us to get down and get hopeless and get depressed, but He doesn't intend for us to stay there. That's when the Lord's going to come to you and say, What are you doing there? And he asked Elijah, What are you doing there? And did you notice Elijah's reply? I've lived for you, Lord, and I've done this, and I preached your word, and I helped these people, and what do they do in return? They're trying to kill me. They killed all you prophets. I'm the last one left. And they're trying to kill me. I want to know what God does for Elijah here. See, Elijah focused on God. At least he talked to God, and then God really begins to help Elijah get over his depression. In chapter 19, verse 15 and 16, it says, Then the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, anoint Hazael king over Syria. Also you shall anoint Jehu the son of Nimshi as king over Israel. And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Maholah you shall anoint as prophet in your place. See, God doesn't just give Elijah something to do. He gives him somebody to minister to. Carl Menninger was the leading psychiatrist of the last part of the 20th century. And somebody asked Mr. Menninger, how can somebody get over depression? Now, they expected him to say, go see a psychiatrist, because he was one. But he didn't. He said this. He said, lock your door behind you. Go across the street. Find somebody that has a need and do something to help them. Leading psychiatrist of the last century said that. That's what God did for Elijah. Imagine that. If you're going through a tough time, you're depressed, you're down. I had a friend that said something to me one time. I was going through a really difficult period, and so was he. And I was having trouble dealing with it. He was having trouble dealing with different circumstances, but we were both going through some things. And we were standing. I remember where we were at. We were in the downstairs part. We were in the youth room at Young's Chapel Church, and we're talking. He's telling me, he's sharing with me about some things going on in his life, and I'm sharing. And he said, "You know what? Here's what I think we ought to do." So I had no idea how I'm going to get out of this mess I'm in. I said, I have no idea how to get out of this mess I'm in. He said, well, here's what we should do. I'm going to go home and I'm going to start praying for you. And I want you to go home and start praying for me. And it was like a light bulb went off. I said, you know what? You ain't the sharpest knife in the drawer. That right there is brilliant. He was a close friend, I could tell him. And you know what? When I started taking my focus off of my problems and I started putting my focus on his problems and how I could help him and what I could do for him and how I could pray for him, and I cried out to God for him, you know what? My problems got better. And he did the same thing for me, and he told me that later. He said, you know what? It's like a weight was lifted off of me. As soon as I started praying for you, and I started thinking about what you're going through, and I started thinking about how God could use me to help you, all of a sudden my stuff got better. Imagine that. Mr. Manager got it, didn't he? And that's the key to the whole thing. Look, if you're feeling depressed, you feel like you might be in one of those stages we talked about, here's what you need to do. You need to go see your doctor. You need to make sure there's not a chemical problem or a physical problem or some medical reason. And once you've done that, you need to go see God. You need to see somebody you trust, and you need to see somebody you believe in. You need to see somebody that loves you. You need to talk to them. And then you need to do what God told Elijah to do. You need to find somebody else that's got a problem. You need to help them. There's nothing that'll help you get through your depression better than helping somebody else get through theirs. But you know what? I want to tie all this together. The whole two-part series, I want to just bring it all together right here. There's no stress. There's no depression like hopelessness. If you're here this morning and you really thought about, what if this was my last day on earth? What if this was it? What if today was my last day? If you're at all unsure about what that means for you, if you're at all unsure about what that would mean for your eternity or what would happen to you, or you have any doubt at all, you don't have hope. You need Jesus. Because without Jesus, you have no hope. Without Jesus' blood on that cross, I have no hope. This is it. And you know, there's nothing that would depress me more as I look around and I see people I love and people I care about, and they've dealt with tremendous loss in their lives and tremendous loss of family members and terrible diseases and afflictions. And I see these awful things happening in this world, and I see the evil that permeates every part of our life. And you know what? Nothing would make me sadder. Nothing would make me more depressed than to think that this is it. Nothing would bother me more than if I thought this life is it. I can get through things and you can get through things because I have hope. I have hope, and I put my hope in Jesus Christ. You know why? Because I've looked at all the other options and I don't see any better one out there. And He's not just the best option, He's the only option. And you can have that hope.